Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of the Committee Reads. I am your host, Kaiju X. With me today, I have Ditto for match 183 Ultraman versus Rodan by Thomas Eckert. The citizens of Kyoto fled for their lives as a frightening shadow loomed over their city. An aerial saurian, Rodan, was on the hunt, and humans were on the menu. Buildings erupted to pieces from shockwaves generated by the prehistoric predator's wings. Rodan noticed a man standing in the midst of the fleeing crowd and descended close to the ground, thinking this human made himself an easy target. However, the man pulled the device from his coat and pointed it to the sky. Rodan shrieked in surprise as his intended prey was bathed in a blinding light. Within seconds, the light had disappeared, and the man had transformed into the heroic Ultraman. Ultraman brought up his fists, while Rodan shrieked aggressively from the skies above. Unlike several beasts he fought during his career, Rodan wasn't a malicious creature, except now it is. However, Ultraman wasn't going to let the giant pterosaur feast on humans he dedicated himself to protecting. Rodan shrieked loudly while circling his new enemy like a vulture. Knowing that the sky was Rodan's true element, Ultraman surprised his opponent by taking flight himself. Rodan, shaking off his surprise, flew downwards with Ultraman closing on him. Like two massive rockets, two airborne giants charged into each other at incredible speed. Rodan curved to his right, hoping to smash his chest spikes into Ultraman. However, Ultraman saw the maneuver coming and turned his body frontwards, grabbing Rodan's neck between his legs. With his foe trapped, Ultraman rotated his body several times in the air. Rodan, still caught in the deadly embrace, grew more disoriented by the second. Ultraman ended the cycle by tossing Rodan straight down with the strength of his legs. Rodan's body whistled like a missile. Whistled like a missile. Interesting little rhyme there. As he descended closer to the earth, the falling pterodactyl was still dizzy from the spinning to right himself. When he came to, he managed to turn to his left to avoid a devastating fall. He found a patch of buildings to land on and searched for his opponent. Suddenly, he shrieked in pain when the specium ray struck him in the back. He quickly turned to see Ultraman standing behind him. Rodan's horns cackled with power and unleashed a uranium beam from his beak. However, Ultraman summoned the shield barrier to defend himself from the purple-colored beam. Rodan tried a second time, but couldn't break his foe's barrier. Realizing that his methods weren't working, Rodan flapped his wings as hard as he could. While the winds he created didn't destroy Ultraman's barrier, it did give him time to get airborne. Ultraman kept his shield up in case Rodan would try any more frontal attacks. The red-silver-colored hero noticed that Rodan wasn't attacking directly. Instead, he was circling around him like before. It was almost as if the prehistoric titan was mocking him. Ultraman, however, wasn't buying it. He saw it more as a cheap attempt to intimidate him. Surely the creature should have known he wasn't safe in the air, Ultraman thought to himself. Turning off his barrier, Ultraman once again took to the air to battle Rodan in his turf. The flying monster turned to his right to face Ultraman, with the latter ready to fire another specium ray, but Rodan had other plans. Ultraman crossed his arms together to fire his traditional attack, but Rodan easily dodged the beam and flew straight into Ultraman's side with his wing. The humanoid warrior cried out in pain as the wing cut into his side and threw him off. Seeing his foe in pain, Rodan opened his wings and clapped them together to create the strongest windstorm he could. The attack was so strong that it forced Ultraman down to the ground. The entire city quaked from the heroic alien's crash. Ultraman did his best to stand up. The impact rattled him up, but that wasn't what made him raise his guard. His color timer was beeping red. He knew his time was running out. He needed to end this fight now. He cried out in pain when the uranium beam struck him in the attack. Huh? A second beam rained down from the sky, but Ultraman backflipped away from it. He looked up to see Rodan traveling down towards him with a mighty shriek. Knowing Rodan had gotten wise to his specium ray, Ultraman decided to pull out some other tricks. When the mutant pterodactyl was close enough, Ultraman put up his hand. Rodan, thinking his foe was going to do another specium ray, prepared to dodge. However, Ultraman threw his hands forward. What came out was something different and more lethal. Pass.
Saw like projectile soared through the air and did the unthinkable. It managed to cut into Rodan's left wing and cleave it in half. Rodan shrieked in pain from the loss of his wing. Without it, he steered off course. Ultraman watched his now one-winged opponent plummet to the ground and skid violently through buildings. For the moment, Rodan laid in a pile of debris. He got back up slowly. Blood oozed out of the wounds on his severed wing. Footsteps coming from behind him made him turn around. Ultraman grabbed the wounded pterosaur by the neck and tossed him mercilessly down hard into the street. Before Rodan could get back up, Ultraman repeated the same technique. Rodan screeched painfully from the second impact. With his left wing critically damaged, he couldn't retreat back into the sky. In the air, Rodan was a force to be reckoned with. On the ground, however, his chances of surviving were slim. He had to do something quick, or he was as good as dead. Ultraman took a minute to examine his crippled foe. At first he thought of sparing Rodan's life, since the creature was only acting out of his primal need to consume, like any wild animal. However, there was always the chance that he may once again plague mankind's cities, and allowing a potential threat to the race he swore to defend be allowed to live is never an option. With his decision made up, he moved closer to his downed adversary. Rodan struggled to stand up, but was met with great difficulty due to the massive blood loss from his open wound. He looked up when a giant silhouette crept towards him. Ultraman summoned a specimen ray into the struggling Rodan, causing him to call out in agony when it exploded on his back. To Ultraman's amazement, the crippled Sauron withstood the blast with little damage. Unbeknownst to Ultraman, Rodan has had a history with withstanding deadly beams, most notably Godzilla's atomic breath and the weapon from mankind's version of Mechagodzilla. Ultraman stepped closer to Rodan, ready to summon another energy saw. That's when Rodan summoned an incredible amount of strength, leaped into the air, and took Ultraman by surprise. Before Ultraman could unleash another energy saw, Rodan's talons grabbed a hold of his arms and then pushed them down. During the charge run, Spike smashed into Ultraman's own color timer, nearly cracking it. Rodan shrieked in rage as he pushed Ultraman down onto the ground. Ultraman's arms were pinned down under Rodan's feet, leaving him vulnerable to attack. Rodan bellowed furiously before ramming his beak into Ultraman's right eye. The hero screamed in pain as Phil's beak viciously tore into his eye socket, drawing blood. Now having only one eye, Ultraman tried to find a way to escape. Before Rodan could inflict any more damage, something happened. Ultraman vanished. The surprised pterosaur landed on the ground, wondering where his foe had gone. That's when Ultraman appeared a good 3 meters away from Rodan's position. He managed to use his teleportation ability to escape from Rodan's attack, but the cost was heavy. Like how he made his foe lose an important appendage, Rodan did the same by destroying his right eye. Both wounded combatants glared at each other. Both were incredibly injured and exhausted. It was time to finish this fight. Ultraman took to the air and placed both fists in front of him. Rodan avoided the attack by ducking and exposing the spikes on his back. Ultraman cried out in pain from the sharp features scratching his body. Rodan turned around and used his one and only functioning wing to create windstorms to blow Ultraman off course. While it didn't force Ultraman down, it did cause him to crash into a building. The hero, however, quickly recovered and teleported in front of Rodan to karate chop him in his wounded wing, causing the Saurian to cry out in pain. Ultraman then delivered a kick to Rodan's chest, driving him backwards before sweep kicking his legs, knocking him down. Ultraman then jumped up and smashed both fists into Rodan's chest as hard as he could, nearly breaking the pterosaur's ribs. Before he could proceed, Rodan smashed his only good wing into Ultraman with all his might. The strike forced Ultraman back and gave Rodan enough time to stand up. Ultraman raised his arms, ready to discharge another specimen ray from his hands. Rodan eyed his foe, daring him to attack. Ultraman responded by unleashing his ray, hoping to score a direct hit onto Rodan's head. However, Rodan used whatever strength he could muster to leap into the air and allow the ray to flow harmlessly beneath him. With his foe too preoccupied with firing his beam, Rodan attacked. He noticed a destroyed eye socket on Ultraman's face and fired his uranium beam directly into it. Ultraman didn't have time to scream before his foe's energy beam traveled through his eye socket and out of his head. Rodan landed onto the ground in time to watch Ultraman's head explode into pieces and humanoid warrior's corpse crash into the ground. Rodan raised his one remaining wing and cackled to the heavens victoriously. Before he could feed, he noticed Ultraman's giant form revert back to its human size. Rodan considered eating his fallen foe, but one human isn't enough to satisfy his hunger, and with his one minion in terrible condition, feeding was no longer the prime objective. Now he needed to find a way home. Winner, Rodan, Heisei.
Uh, well, that was a
Mhm.
match. It doesn't, like, this could be the fact that we're, like, coming off the heels of the previous match. It feels like an inoffensive, like, palate cleanser just to get rid of 182 out of my memory.
Uh,
Uh, I think this does have a myriad of issues looking back at it. And I think the biggest obvious ones is just sort of name repetition, which is a big one. Like Ultraman and Rodan get repeated so many times throughout that it just kind of
yeah.
becomes kind of numb. It becomes kind of numb partway through.
Yeah,
Uh,
especially since we've had Rodan before.
yeah, and yeah, we didn't have Rodan literally like 2 matches ago, so it's like, oh, hello. Uh, Friggin'. So it was like that, and then just like it, just like it's all right. It's definitely more on the unremarkable end of the spectrum as far as matches go. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it does kind of like just start right then there, like Ultraman's literally in the first paragraph. It's like, but again, much like I don't know. It felt inoffensive though. This one was definitely much like it wasn't trying to do anything more or have any interesting ideas to play around with. So arguably, I'd say this one's a little more earnest in terms of just being a straightforward KWC match. Even then, I
Uh-huh.
do think there are just elements that hinder it a bit. Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, like it's just not a whole lot of much. It's just, oh, they fight and they do stuff, and that's about the extent of it. It's not.
Hmm.
I'd argue Thomas Eckert's probably done better matches even before this. I don't think it's one of his stronger entries. It's all right, but I don't think it's one of
Hmm.
his stronger entries. And I'd say one of my last points of criticism is looking at it now is just the paragraphs. Those things are, granted, it was
Those are
easy to split
big.
it. It was easy to split it apart for us reading, but they're still kind of big. I feel like they could have been like separated down to make it easier to go through and like space it out some.
Yeah, it
Uh,
looks like you can like cut them in half.
yeah, I think like literally all 8 of these like all 8 of these paragraphs could be divided into 16, and I think we'd be good. Uh,
Yeah.
but that's just kind of what I think. Yeah, but yeah, that's like I don't. It feels weird because again, with 181 into account too, where I felt like there was a whole lot of nothing for the most part, with
Mhm.
it, save for a couple concepts and ideas. I don't know. I think I just have a different. It could like I'm not completely sure. Maybe it's the author. Maybe it's just the language. It's like this one's at least like inoffensively all right. It is pretty straightforward and simple though, which if you're expecting more, you're not gonna get much more. So
Yeah.
and I'll
Well,
say
we're
that
not memeing on it, so
right. We at least weren't memeing on it, so yeah, I guess that's a plus, I suppose.
the most.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the banner, which I know I made this banner, it's simple, much like the match itself. It's simple. I feel like there could. What I think I wanted to do originally was have
Mhm.
more like aerial effects, like Ultraman surrounded by like some supersonic things, and Rodan leaving like a trail behind him.
Huh.
But I think that was like, if I'm remembering that correctly, I think that's what I wanted to do with this one, but I couldn't. I wasn't satisfied, and I just felt like maybe simpler's better. Looking at it now,
Right.
though, while I think Ultraman kind of looks all right, kind of, except for maybe say with a timer, a color timer, I think that feels a little off. Rodan, I think, could have
Uh,
been adjusted better to fit the color temperature of the environment, maybe a little more blue.
hmm.
He
Yeah.
like
Uh,
because he's further back, so he should have more like obstruction going on. And then
yeah.
maybe just more nuanced lighting overall. Those are probably areas I probably would have liked to have adjusted looking back at it now. So
I think you could have added like a yellow kind of glow to like the underside of
yeah,
Rodan because you have like that really bright yellow
yeah. Like both
flash.
Ultraman and Rodan could have had
Everywhere.
like extra yellow. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's also like the pagoda thing
Yeah,
that
yeah. The Kyoto
that they're
Tower.
passing by. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I think you could have had that like underneath Ultraman bit too. Not too much, but like a little bit of it.
A little bit. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I think Ultraman definitely like fits the best I think he's the one that kind of looks the most like in there.
Yeah, most natural. But even then,
Yeah,
there are some adjustments, and then yeah, Rodan definitely could have used some improvements.
mhm,
Looking back at
yeah.
it now, so
I mean, I do like the pose for Ultraman. Like, it's a pretty good one. Like,
yeah,
if
that's a good
it's just
pose.
him
That's a good.
flying.
Right, right, yeah, yeah. Ultraman flying's not something we get too frequently. But yeah, no, I think this. Yeah, I like the Ultraman pose. Rodan one, I think could have been better.
Yeah, because it looks like I don't know if you can see it, but it's like there's like Ultraman's at a slight angle, but Rodan's not like directly following behind.
Yeah, no, I got you.
It's
I
like
got you.
Rodan's going off into one angle while Ultraman's kind of like and they're like cross
Yeah,
section
right,
kind of thing.
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
No, I got you.
but I mean, I get the idea, but and it looks I think it looks fine.
Yeah.
Like, it's a simple banner, but I think it does work overall.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, what do you think of the match, man? Like any other like elaborate like any other
Uh,
thoughts?
do you remember when this one came out? I feel like I don't
This
remember.
this one was a while ago.
Like I don't know.
I
Was
think
it like pre 2014 maybe?
no, 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 2016.
2016. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just feels like a lot of the Ultraman matches back then just kind of didn't really utilize a lot of what Ultraman has to offer because I feel like if this was made today, we would see like the SSSP like
Oh
fighting
yeah.
alongside Rodan. Like
Mhm.
it's because a lot of the matches just have him solo.
Yeah, yeah, and likewise too. I think this is another little pet peeve of my own. The host of Ultraman's just the ever
Oh,
so
he's just
vague,
nameless.
yeah, nameless man. It's just like I get Shin Hayata wouldn't have been much of a character, but I feel like it does more dignity to call him by the character's
Like
name
Shin.
as opposed even if he doesn't even need dialogue. I just feel like the jumping around of like in this, not even just with this match, but even like some of Tom's earlier Ultraman matches, where Ultraman was just the man. It was just
Yeah.
like it should have like doesn't need to like hop around. Like it's like oh no, just call him by Shin Hayata. That's the character's name. Even if you don't have any dialogue for the character, it at least acknowledges the character's connection to the character to Ultraman. So it's like yeah, I think
I
that's one.
feel like it's kind of like a Superman kind of thing where it's like I don't know, like if Superman stories never mentioned Clark Kent, like it's just a dude
Yeah,
that opens his shirt and it's like, oh, now he's Superman. I was
yeah.
like, well, you can tell us who's behind, you know, the Superman,
Mhm.
even if he doesn't say anything or like do much. I feel like we could have gotten that for Ultraman, like, oh, Shin Hayata, the legendary hero that fought monsters back then.
Or something.
Because yeah, uh, yeah, I feel like a lot of Ultraman matches back then just really didn't utilize a lot of what Ultraman had to offer,
Right,
or like what his series did.
right, right. Nowadays, though, I think we're seeing a much better utilization of the Ultraman elements. Fortunately,
Because I think it's also just because like Ultraman now is more accessible.
yes.
Because you have like YouTube and Amazon, you can buy like the DVDs and the various streaming services. Where I guess that wasn't much of a thing back then. It was harder to get
Yeah, it was.
access to Ultraman.
Yeah, but now it's become much more commonplace. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, now we can like better, I guess, rep Ultraman.
hmm
Yeah, like you said, like instead of him just being the man,
Yeah,
uh, the fights overall I think was pretty good for like just them squaring off
yeah,
because it does do like what you expect Ultraman to do. Uh, he does use his abilities like teleportation. I thought that one actually surprised me. I forgot he had that.
Oh yeah, no, that one's
I was like, oh yeah, he can do that. The buzz saws were cool. Especially Marie. I can buy like Rodan taking as much punishment
in this
as
one.
he
Yeah,
does in this one because we do see in the movie that he does contend with like Heisei Godzilla, like a post supercharge Godzilla
yeah,
and Mecha Godzilla. Even if well, he got turned into a crater by the plasma grenade, like he still technically lived.
yeah,
Wasn't outright killed, so I can believe that he can tank some of Ultraman's like Specium rays.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
not like we haven't seen Ultraman lose before.
Of
You know,
course.
he lost to Gomora, I just think this one might have. It just feels a little overkill that like Rodan blows his head off.
Oh yeah.
Like I can buy that his beak was strong enough to like puncture his eye, or that his chest spikes were strong enough to like scratch the color timer.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't know. It feels like, and you got to consider the size of Rodan and Ultraman.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the beam had to have been really small and concentrated to have done that, right?
I guess, yeah.
Where it's usually like bigger. I don't know. It was just such a weird kind of end to it. Where it's
Right.
like, it's not kind of like my favorite. It's not because it's like, oh, Ultraman dies. It just feels odd.
Yeah.
I will say, like, when we started reading, like, my mind thought, oh, okay, I think I remember how this ends, and I thought it was like Rodan eating Shin Hayata afterwards, but I guess he didn't. So
Huh?
that was nice because it's like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, what's one human gonna do when his wings are cut up and stuff?
Yeah. Priorities. At
And
least
yeah,
Rodan has his priorities straight in this match. So
yeah, it's not like Rodan didn't take damage. I guess it felt more like he did,
mhm.
as opposed to like the last match where Corsaurs and Titanosaurs just shrugged it off
Right.
after some rain.
And actually, you know what? I'd say this match does Rodan more justice than 181, comparatively speaking. Like, at least this one treated him as a formidable enough opponent for Ultraman to deal with, rather than being like, oh, we have two Rodans, but they both get beaten real easily.
And then there's Sanda, who's like there.
Right. There to pretty much die to the Super Rodan of that match. Yeah.
Right. So I think this one kind of feels more like a streamline, like what Rodan versus a monster could be. Like it's more streamlined
Yeah. And
as opposed to
straightforward.
the Rodan versus King Caesar and Sanda, where it's like I guess the fluff, if you will, or like
Yeah.
the some of the monsters that are padding
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
trimmed out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, overall I think this one was like pretty good compared to like the other matches we've read in the recent matches that we've read.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. Yeah, no, surprisingly, for
Yeah.
as simple, straightforward, and short as it is, it's so weird that it's better than the other two. What the heck? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, nevertheless, though, I mean,
I think that's more or less it.
yeah, I think, yeah.
Oh, so I guess one thing to ask is like, what happens to Ultraman now? Because if Shin Hayata lives, but Ultraman died, or does he just like revert back into Shin and just kind of heal or
I,
something?
I guess, I don't know.
Has that ever happened before
I,
in like any Ultra media?
I don't think I'd be able to really answer that for myself, but it is an interesting scenario. Especially considering the weird relationship with Ultraman and Hayata is just like, oh yeah, no, they're two separate entities that kind of inhabit the same body, if you will.
Yeah, so
So
it's like I guess if he is dead, then Ultraman, I guess. Oh, I guess Shin Kai can't become Ultraman anymore.
I guess.
Hmm. Oh, speaking of, that is one thing I liked about the fight is that I don't know. Maybe, I guess it's just because I've seen Shin Ultraman like a few months ago, but I really liked how he did like the spinning. Like he grabs
Oh
Rodan
yeah,
by the with his legs and like spins.
yeah, that's right.
That felt very Shin Ultraman
Right.
esque.
It's funny because yeah, this precedes this by a long shot. So it's like, yeah, no, clearly being able to adhere to the logic, the logic of Ultraman, like doing the wackier stuff too. It's like, yeah, no, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. Now I can't wait for the sequel where the Ultra Brothers show up and kill Rodan.
a one winged Rodan
Yeah.
and one winged angel plays in the background. Oh my gosh! But uh, oh, we're joking, of course. We're joking, but very good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, very good. Yeah, no, I think that's probably everything though. This is just super simple. And you know what? Great palate cleanser after 182. I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah.
So, with that said, this has been match 183, and we're gonna see you guys for the penultimate match for the session for the season, match 184, and then it's going to be the finale with 185. Oh shoot, we're almost there.
Wow.
took long enough. But yeah, no. Until then, folks, see ya.
See ya.